Lost dogs. Frank and Gina H. moved into their home built along the edge of the Mark Twain National Forest in the great state of Missouri in the year 1999. They had a small farm where they raised several farm animals, and they have lost some of those animals over the past 25 years, but most of all, they have lost their guard dogs. Frank and Gina started out with just a family dog when they first moved onto the property. They had a mutt they had rescued, and they had been with them from the start of the summer, about 3 months, when it came up missing. There was no warning, no odd animal sounds, just the dog didn't come back one day. Frank joked it had felt the winter coming on and had headed south for the winter. A couple weeks later, Frank brought home a half German Shepherd, half something else. Obviously, the second half was a smaller dog, as this mutt was smaller in size than the average full blooded German Shepherd. Casey was with the family until the following summer when he too disappeared toward the end of the summer. At this point, Frank and Gina had been there for a year and had gotten an idea of what things were like. They were completely unaware that perhaps something was lurking in the national forest that hugged their property. The second disappearance was strange, definitely disheartening, as they had become much more attached to the second dog since it was with them for much longer. Frank and Gina let the winter pass before they found another dog to call their own. It was perhaps not full-blooded collie, but it was certainly leaning heavy in that direction. They were never sure what other breeds might have been involved, but the collie could have passed for what Lassie's sister, according to the couple. Lassie was also with them to the end of that summer. There was never any sign of anything nefarious having happened to any of the dogs, but after the third one came up missing, the couple began to suspect it was more than just the dogs deciding to go south for the winter. They didn't get another dog for a couple of years. By that point in time, Frank was doing well at his job and they had decided to pursue children. So they put the idea of a four-legged friend on hold for a while. 2 years later, after having tried the entire span, the couple found out they would never have children unless they chose to adopt, something neither of them was ready to do. To help ease the painful news, Frank went out and got them what was supposed to be a German Shepherd that had an eighth of a gray wolf in it. The dog looked like a wolf, and according to Gina, Leo had a snout longer than any dog that species, and he could eat an entire can of dog food in one bite, which he did on a daily basis. They got Leo in the fall, and he was a little over 2 years when he too disappeared at the end of the summer. Leo had survived an entire year longer than the other dogs, perhaps because he was bigger. He did have a big, long snout, which meant he had teeth that were much more suited for inflicting wounds to animals with thick hides, even Sasquatch. The couple didn't get another dog for a couple more years, even then the pooch showed up one day at their door, covered in ticks and full of fleas, looking like it had been on some kind of a journey to have reached their place. Pixie was a part beagle, part maybe hound dog, because she was a little larger than the average beagle, but looked mostly like one, with the exception of a bigger, slightly longer body. Pixie was very vocal once she adopted the place as her own. She may have arrived shivering and not from the cold, as mentioned, covered in ticks and fleas, so she had been through some pretty serious ground, and most likely the national forest. Neither the couple nor the vet knew for sure how old Pixie was, but best guess was that she was about 2 or 3 years old when she arrived. Pixie was with them for almost 10 years. The entire 10 years, Pixie was very vocal, but never was she so hyper as when the end of the summer came around. And despite her excited state, she was never wanting to go more than a few steps away from the house during that time. She acted like there was something just beyond the yard waiting in the forest. The road that went past the property was gravel and seldom traveled. One day while out getting the mail, Frank looked down and saw a big print, and all he could make out was the back half of it, so the chances of identifying the print were nearly impossible. It was near the end of August when he saw the print. Nothing happened that year, but 2 years later was when they lost Pixie. It is possible that Pixie just left this world on her own terms. Frank said she was uncommon smart, especially when it came to showing common sense, which is what made it possible for her to live as long as she lasted. However, it is also possible that she was taken. And once again, the dog was there one minute and just never showed up again. The couple had another mutt show up on their door one day. Stinky was half yellow lab and half pit bull, female, that was overweight and stunk to high heaven. She was with the couple up until recently, when this time around a blood trail was found. Frank wasn't sure it was Stinky, but she was missing, as there was a blood trail which he picked up about a football field away from the house. It followed a trail which existed and was likely very popular with the local deer and other smaller wildlife. This time, however, Frank had an idea whatever had made the blood trail was much bigger than a deer. He found the tracks, which were never clear, and mostly he could only find the back part of a print. The times he was able to see the front part of the print, it was really confusing. He saw two prints, and one had claws, while the other did not appear to have any. It wasn't until he found the remains of Stinky that he was able to figure out that he had been not so much wrong as he was misled, or better said, he had been fooled. Yes, he was seeing tracks, but they were of two separate animals, and shockingly, the second animal was being very careful to step only where the first animal had been stepping. Both creatures were being careful not to leave a full print. Both were showing a surprisingly intelligence in hiding their true identity by only walking on the back of their feet. Perhaps more shocking than all that was the fact that they were both bipedal. He was tracking an animal that was walking on 2 feet that was tracking an animal that was walking on 2 feet. The two prints he was able to find that showed any clue as to what the front of the tracks were both suggested that the feet were big, but what he was pretty sure was making the first print was leaving claw prints. Claw prints were very similar to what a wolf would leave, but obviously the feet were bigger. The creature making the print, which seemed to be over the first set of tracks, appeared to lack the claws, but its feet were slightly bigger in width and likely length as well. It was the end of the summer, and finding his dog, or what was left of it, had taken a lot of the desire to do any tracking right out of Frank. Add in he was thirsty, and it seemed that the conclusion to this hunt was still a long way off, so in the end he decided to give up and go back home. Both Frank and Gina would like to have known what was involved, but that was how things ended. Frank said that, to be completely honest, he became more afraid than angry after finding their dog, and some might say he chickened out, while others might say he came to his senses. But he did start giving much more thought to the fact that what he was hunting was also walking on 2 feet, which was enough of a thing out of the norm to cause him to decide to give up his desire for revenge. Having time to think about what they had lost, what little could be done about it at that point, and what could lay ahead if he did manage to catch up with the two parties that had stayed ahead of him the entire time he had been on the hunt, was enough to merit ending the chase. That happened just a couple of years back. Frank and Gina haven't lost any further animals, but the reason is because they haven't had any more dogs. Giving thought as to what it was that killed their dogs when taking into consideration the tracks that Frank followed, it has a few possibilities that there is only one which adds up completely, but only if you can believe such creatures exist. What has been taking their dogs over the years has a couple of possibilities, though the tracks Frank followed lean heavy more towards one possibility than the others. The most obvious possibility is that it is a human being, probably a neighbor, but possibly someone who migrates through the area at the end of the summers. There is no argument that human beings exist, which adds to the most credibility of this choice. Number 2. The culprit is the rare black bear which still lives in an area where they have long thought to have been gone. This goes a long way towards explaining at least one set of the tracks which Frank was following that day. Black bears are known to be preparing for hibernation with the coming of winter, which means they are eating whatever they can get their paws on in order to bulk up for the long sleep. Therefore, it is quite possible a rare black bear was feasting on their dogs through the years. Perhaps a generation of black bear came and went several times over, and each one was taught to fatten up on the dogs found at Frank and Gina's home. What works against that idea is that it would seem likely that Frank and Gina would have become aware of a bear over the years. Bears are loud, and they leave easy to find prints wherever they go. It seems unlikely that even if there was one bear which was careful about not leaving tracks, that there would have been a generation or several generations which would not be that careful. Number 3. It was a Dogman that was leading the way, and behind it was a Sasquatch hunting it. Number 4. It was a pair of Sasquatch, and the tracks which had the claws were either a mistake on my part, remember there was only the one, or perhaps a Sasquatch made it to look like they had claws, though this is less likely than the number 3 choice. Well, it could have been any of those, folks. Thanks a lot for coming and visiting. Please like and subscribe. Godspeed.